Hi, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to our home. Here's Ruthie with the new puppies. She wanted to get in on this Blackbird pond discussion too, so I told her she could join us this evening. Hey, everybody. Okay, so we are in chapter 2, and Kit is going to get to meet her aunt and her uncle and her two cousins. And remember, or in chapter 3, we do. In chapter 2, at the very end, remember, the captain was not very thrilled that Kit did not manage to tell anybody about her coming. So her aunt and uncle don't know she's coming. They're not there to meet her. And so he's having to send men with her 7 trunks to their house. And it's not exactly dry and easy to walk through. It's muddy, it's mucky, it's yucky. And as we notice on page 29, she makes the statement that Wethersfield was not a fine town. She didn't even consider it really a settlement. She thought it was more lonely and dreary even than Saybrook. And she talks about a man in a leather coat and breeches. What are breeches? We don't use that terminology very often anymore. So what are breeches? If you said pants, give yourself a pat on the back. They are pants. Come see me for a sucker. If you got pants right, you can come see me for a sucker. Yes, they're pants. So he's walking beside her. He's carrying her trunk, and she wants to lift up her skirts because it is so wet and muddy. But she says there was a new self-consciousness that restrained her. Why is all of a sudden, she has seemed throughout the entire voyage like a very confident woman, and now all of a sudden she's feeling very self-conscious. First off, what do they mean by self-conscious? What is she starting to realize? Why is she feeling that way now? You want to hit pause and discuss amongst yourselves what it is and why she's feeling that way? Okay, now, when she gets to her aunt and uncle's house, they make a point that the captain lifted the iron knocker, and there was a plainly servant, is what Kit calls her, a plainly servant. I'm on page 30. A thin, gray-haired woman, and he says, "Do I have the honor of addressing?" Well, Rachel immediately thinks that Kit is her dead sister, Margaret, and she's like, "Oh my goodness, Margaret." She's not sure, and she says, "No, I'm Catherine." Oh, wow, she's just taken back. I mean, because remember, she doesn't know she's coming. She believes her sister is dead, but or she knows her sister has passed away, but Kit must look an awful lot like her own mother for her aunt to mistake her. There is, and we find out later in the story, she said, I can't believe how much you look like your mom. Yes, I see your dad in you, but wow, I can't believe how much you look like your mom." And that's when Kit finally realizes on the bottom of page 30 that this strange woman, she's not very beautiful, but she is her Aunt Rachel. And she says, well, on the top of 31, quite some time ago she must have been beautiful. Well, what would have changed her? Yes, she's gotten older, but think about the time period they live in. Is Rachel living an easy life in the Puritan settlement? Are times easy for the people there? She then the men go to leave. Aunt Rachel offers them breakfast or something to drink, and they're like, no, no, we're okay. And they go to leave. And before Nat leaves, we have a little bit of foreshadowing on the page 31 where it says, "A question that was suddenly weighted with regret." Well, what question? They're looking at each other in the eyes. What question do you think? And I want you to discuss this. What question are they both wondering at the same time? Both Kit and Nat. Think of their interaction on the ship on their way over. Think of their interaction after she jumped off to get or jumped out of the longboat to get the doll. Think of the teasing he's done. What question do you think that they are weighing between them? You back? All right. Well, then on page 32, we get to meet Uncle Matthew. And Uncle Matthew just seems like quite the pleasant fellow, doesn't he? I don't think so. She makes the point of saying that she cannot read the faintest slight of welcome in his thin, stern lips, or under the eyes that glowered fiercely at her from under heavy, grizzled eyebrows. What do you think, just on that description that Spear's given us, what do you think about Uncle Matthew? What kind of a person is he? What kind of a man is he? How would you describe Uncle Matthew? Go ahead and discuss. What do you think, Ruthie? She thinks he's had a hard life too. And part of that hard life makes people a little stern, a little grouchy. And we go on, she asks later on in the chapter, she wonders, what did my aunt ever see in this guy? Because right now he's not all that good looking and he's not really nice. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, we go to meet then her cousins. And the first one she meets is Judith. And she sees the beauty that her aunt must once have been in Judith. Judith is gorgeous. She says on page 32, Judith's face fulfilled in every exquisite detail. Bleh. What does exquisite mean? It's like fancy, wonderful. Every fancy detail, the picture she had treasured of her imagined aunt. So Judith looks like her aunt did when her aunt was younger. And that's how Kit had her aunt pictured. Well, then we meet Mercy, and I love how Spear describes Mercy's eyes. She said Kit was only aware of the most extraordinary eyes she had ever seen. Gray as rain at sea, wide and clear and filled with light. So her eyes, I have these big, beautiful gray eyes pictured. And when she steps out, she realizes she's on a crutch and Mercy's crippled. Now, what do you think life is going to be like for Mercy in this time period in history if she is a cripple? Think about what women are supposed to do, what women are supposed to be, what kind of a man would want to marry during this time period and why. And I want you to kind of discuss that. Do you think that Mercy had very many options as somebody suffering from some sort of challenge, a physical challenge like she had? How would men have viewed this at this time? Discuss. Okay, then Uncle Matthew goes out and he sees her 7 trunks. And he's like, why so many trunks for just a visit? And she said, oh, I'm not here to visit, I'm here to stay. And he gets flustered and kind of gets angry with her. And he's like, why didn't you at least write? What did she tell us? What was her reason? On page 36, why didn't she write her aunt and uncle and ask if she could come stay? There's a couple of different ones, but the first one she gives us on 36. Okay, did you discuss how she had said that she was scared? How did she word that? I did not dare write, she said. I was afraid you might not tell me to come, and I had to come. So first she didn't write because she was fearful. She was very scared that if she wrote and they turned her away, what was going to happen? Well, we find that out on the next page. What's happened after Grandfather has passed away? What did Kit discover after Grandpa died? Was he the wealthy man she thought he was? No, you're right. He wasn't. In fact, she had to do what Uncle Matthew says. She says, I found that all we had was debt. And the first question Uncle Matthew asks is, did you pay it off? Remember, it is important, especially at this time. It's important now too, so don't you dare try to get out of paying your debts. But it was important, especially in this time period. If you owed a debt, you paid for it. And he says, did you pay for it? And she says, yes, I sold all the land. I sold all the furniture. What else did she sell? She said, I even had to sell my own slave girl. And he doesn't care about that because to him, he sees the fact that she had a slave as nothing more than making her kind of a spoiled brat. But what does that tell us about Kit, that she took it upon herself to make sure all those debts were paid? That tells us an important part of her character. And I want you to discuss that in your group now. What does it tell you about Kit? And how might that benefit her in the future? What might that do for her? Now remember, a large reason as to why Grandpa has lost the farm wasn't necessarily Grandpa's fault. He trusted the wrong guy, right? And that guy kind of took off with his money. He was swindled. But Kit still did the right thing. She still took care of it. But does she have anywhere else she can possibly go? What kind of conflict could that lead to in the future? I mean, she's stuck there, like it or not. Now on page 38, Uncle Matthew asks if Grandfather was a kingsman. And what does she say a kingsman is? She says what? A royalist. He was loyal to King James, aren't you? And he doesn't say anything. What do you think this could foreshadow? What could the fact that Uncle Matthew is very bound and determined that he will, to find out what her political aspirations were. Hi, Ashton, come on in. I want you to discuss what you think Matthew and Kit's future conflict may be based on what he's asked her about her political beliefs. All right. For tomorrow, read chapter 4. Great job, everybody. Don't forget, submit your discussion document to me. Have a great weekend.